So in this section of the course, we're going to be talking about Azure Active Directory. I'll show you how to create it, how to upgrade to the premium level, some of those features like identity protection and self-service password reset, etc. Now, Azure AD is Microsoft's preferred and recommended solution for providing security services to your applications. And so the concept here is you register your application with Azure AD, and then you can basically delegate the user ID management, the login, user ID and password, multi-factor authentication, all of the intelligence that needs to happen in order to secure the user's accounts. You delegate that to Azure AD. Azure charges you for that service, of course, but it's basically user management as a service, identity as a service. We look at some of the features. One of the coolest ones is to be able to integrate with your on-premises AD. And so this concept of single sign-on means that users already have a user ID and password for your organization, and that's managed by your on-premises Active Directory server. So Azure AD actually synchronizes with your on-premises server so that users who already have identity can just use that identity in the cloud and no need for a second account. So basically, tying in with Azure AD for your application gives a big advantage to your existing users. There's also basically developer tools so that you can then register your application. You can use the roles and the various things that are set up within AD within your application, and you don't even have to code much of this, right? You just delegate that to Azure. Now we're going to get into in this section, we're going to get into how to create it and some of those advanced features that are covered by this exam. Azure AD does work with external users, so even if you have an on-premises AD and your employees are covered by that, you don't necessarily want to be adding people who are not employees to your on-premises AD. And so this concept of working with social media companies like Facebook and Google and LinkedIn, or working with your partners who can then link their AD to yours, or even just an invitation to an individual user to join. So there's many different ways you can get external people working with your AD. Let's talk about the different tiers. If we go down to this pricing section, we can see that Microsoft currently provides pretty much 3 different tiers that are relevant to this discussion. Now, there is an Office 365 tier. This isn't an Office 365 course or exam, and so we're not going to be talking about that, but there is a free tier, and then there are 2 Premium P1 and Premium P2. Up until recently, there was a basic tier, so you may see reference to the basic tier, but Microsoft said that not a lot of people were choosing it, and so they just basically removed it as an option. So you're either on the free plan or you're going to want to upgrade to one of the premium plans. Now, the free tier, as you would expect, is limited. And so you don't have unlimited objects and unlimited applications. You have a 500,000 object limit. What does that mean? So you're able to create users and register users in your application, groups, and other Azure AD objects, roles, etc. Those are all individual things that are stored in your AD. So there's an upper limit of 500,000 aggregate of all of those, depending no matter what type it is that you're storing. And then it has up to 10 single sign-on supported applications. And so if you want to use your on-premises AD, you can use that up to 10 apps. So I would say it's a fairly generous limit for a lot of uses. Now, maybe if you're a global multinational corporation, this limit starts to be cumbersome, but then you're just going to end up upgrading and would have to pay for it. So if we scroll down on this page here, I'm going to skip over the Office 365 section, and we're going to go right into talking about what do you get on the premium side. Now, one of the more significant things that you get is the ability for users to update their password. And so if you have an application and the user's like, oh, I'm not happy with this password anymore, and so I'm going to go and update it, they can update that. And that can actually optionally be pushed back to your on-premises AD. So they update their password in Azure, that gets pushed back into their Windows environment, and then they use the new password when they log in next time into their desktop. There's a bunch of other things here. We'll go down to talking about things like dynamic groups, where we can create a group. Now, for free, you can create a static group, which is just a group, and then you identify the 5 or 10 members. You put the members in the group. Then you can assign permissions to that group. But you can have dynamic groups where everyone who's got the word developer in their job title is part of that group, or anyone who's in this section of the, this role, this part of their name, their location, etc. You can have groups that are based on their properties. Conditional access is cool too, and we do have a section of this course in a few minutes here talking about conditional access, but you have to be on the premium tier to be able to have basically any of these advanced features. Like Azure Information Protection is like a DRM for your documents, and so you can mark documents as having read-only access and not forwarded, and it will integrate with Office 365 and make sure that things don't get taken out of Azure and posted to the web or forwarded to external email addresses. Scrolling down, we've got, we had MFA in a previous section, being able to use external MFA providers. That's in preview mode. Now the P2, so now that was the P1 tier. You have to actually, for any of this artificial intelligence, so this identity protection is actually checking your accounts regularly to see if anything suspicious is going on, and can shut those accounts down or pause them or enable extra checks. So any of this sort of risk, these risk-based conditional access, and any of this artificial intelligence, machine learning, pattern recognition, actively protecting your account. Privileged identity management, it's pretty cool. This is when you have administrators and people with elevated privileges and basically forcing them to provide additional multi-factor authentication, because if you're logging in as your user, it's for one thing, but if you're logging in as an admin, we want to be extra careful. Access reviews allows you to force managers to review membership of groups to make sure that everyone who has access to an application or to a particular group of applications, every 6 months, every year, somebody's forced to go through and review that access and then revoke it if it's no longer needed. Now you can see the pricing. So the free tier is free. The P1 tier is around $6 a month per user, and the P2 tier $9 per month per user. So I kind of flew through this. We've got some videos coming up talking about a self-service password reset, identity protection, conditional access, access reviews, how to set up your AD for the first time. So anyways, that's the overview of what you get from Microsoft Azure AD. Now, if you don't have Azure Active Directory, it's as simple as going into the marketplace. So you click the green plus sign, search for Active Directory, and you'll see Azure Active Directory listed among the results. If we say create, then it's very simple to create an Active Directory. You give it a name, and then you basically have to create a domain name, which is .onmicrosoft.com. So you basically give it an initial domain name and your organizational name, pick your region, and then click create. And Microsoft will create for you an empty, free Azure Active Directory. Now I'm just going to use the Active Directory that I've previously created. You can see that my organization name is Scott's Course Outlook, and the domain name is scott'scourseoutlook.onmicrosoft.com. This is an Azure free account. And the basic concept with Azure Active Directory, the core of it, is going to be around users, groups, and roles. Okay, and now you add applications into your Active Directory, and they can basically be assigned roles and permissions based on that. So if I go into the users section, I can see that I've previously created 3 users, 2 of them being members of my Active Directory and 1 being an external B2B guest user. And I can very easily manually add more users, up to 500,000, to my free account simply by just going and adding a new user into here. Okay. Now, those users can then be grouped into perhaps their roles. So if you have, your customers are using your application, then you can create a customers group and you can have members of that group. And based on the membership of the group, they might have certain permissions within your application. Employees, supervisors, accounting department, IT department, developers. You can create groups of similar people and then assign users to that group. Now, we said before that Active Directory is for managing users. It's identity as a service. And so, theoretically, you can go into your Active Directory and you can say, I want to add a new user. Let's add Joe Smith as a user. Now, Joe Smith, his email is joe.smith@gmail.com. Okay, we're going to add Joe Smith as a user, but we'll see right away that we cannot add Joe Smith as a full-on user because gmail.com is not our domain name, and of course it's a Google account. It could never be our domain name. So we have to use a domain for Joe Smith, and so let's say, it's company.com. But even company.com is not a managed verified domain name in this Active Directory. So the first thing that we're going to need to do is add a custom domain name. Now, something will work. I'll show you what it will work because we created this Active Directory as Scott's Course Outlook at .onmicrosoft.com. So if I put Joe Smith at Scott's Course Outlook at .onmicrosoft.com as the email address, that will work because this domain is managed by this Active Directory. Even though this isn't a real email account, we could create a user with this email account and it would be a valid user to log into our applications. But many of us want to do single sign-on. We want users to be able to use the same user ID and password in Active Directory in their company as well as using our applications that connect to Azure Active Directory. So to do that, we're going to need to add a custom domain name. So I'm going to close off that, go up to the top level, and we're going to see custom domain names down the settings here. Go into here, and right now we've got the default, which was when we created it, scottscourseoutlook.onmicrosoft.com. This I added a long time ago, cloudcafe.co. It is a verified domain. But what we want to do, let's add another verified domain. What this means is we'll be able to add our company domain to this Azure Directory, and if we can verify that we own it, then users can use those domain names to create accounts and to log in. Now, I happen to own a number of domain names, and so we're going to use one of my domain names, herocourses.net. So we're going to tell Microsoft Azure Active Directory that we own this domain, and then we should be able to manage users that have this domain name. So I'm going to say add domain. Now we do need to prove that we own it. This is very similar to the way that Microsoft requires proof for a DNS when you're doing DNS records managed applications. So we need to prove that we own it. In order to prove that we own it, we need to add the following information into our domain name service. So this is a TXT record with this alias and this text field basically. And so we're going to have to go to our registrar, modify this to add a TXT record, and prove that we own this. Now my registrar happens to be Namecheap, and so I'm going to have to go into the DNS section. So I'll go down here, go into DNS, and we're going to have to add, like it says, a TXT record. Now it already contains one TXT record, so we're going to have to add a new record. This is a TXT record. Host is an @ symbol according to this. I'm going to copy the value, and they want the TTL to be 1 hour, which is 3600. And so I'm going to say save. So this is saved. And if we go back to the Azure website, we can click the verify button, but for now it's not going to find this TXT record that it's looking for. We'll give the DNS system let's give it a day to update. So to order to add a custom domain, you just have to add it very simply, but then you have to prove that you own it, and you prove that you own it by making changes to the DNS records. So it's the next morning, and I go into the herocourses.net domain. I click verify, and it says domain name verified. And so it was successfully verified. I can close this out, and we can see that now herocourses.net is a valid domain in the list of domains. If I go over to the user section and create a new user, I can create test user. And if I use the herocourses.net domain, then you can see that Microsoft puts a green check mark next to it, which means it's a valid domain. So in this video, we've added a custom domain to Active Directory, which we can start using for users and systems. So I want to keep playing with the Azure Active Directory features, but to do that, I think I want to get up to the Azure Premium P2 level. So I'm going to go into my Azure Active Directory. This is a test account that I can play with and eventually delete when I no longer need. And I'm going to basically start the free trial. So because I want the identity protection, I want to start the Premium P2 free trial. So the trial includes 100 licenses. It will be active for 30 days. If I wish to upgrade, I'll need to purchase. Okay, so I'm going to say activate. So we're going to let this activate. Well, it says successfully activated. Then coming up, we can start playing with the Premium P2 features. So we've given it a couple minutes, and it was successfully updated our account to Azure Active Directory Premium P2 level. The P2 level allows us to use all of the advanced features that we're about to investigate. Now, this is just a test account. Unfortunately, it does not have very many users or any applications or anything associated with it, but it's good for this purpose, I guess. First thing we're going to do, we're going to investigate something called Azure AD Identity Protection. If I go into the New tab, go down to Identity category, we saw that Azure AD Identity Protection is in yellow here. Now it's chosen our account, Scott's Test Directory, for this. If this is not the correct account, you can't change it here. You have to go over to the top right and say Switch Directory. Now I already have Identity Protection enabled, but if you don't, you just come down here and click the Create button, and that will enable the Azure Identity Protection onto your account. Now, Identity Protection is a series of machine learning algorithms that will analyze the users, logins, and any sort of vulnerabilities in your Active Directory account. So this is using some of those advanced AI machine learning features in order to warn you about things that could be happening within your Active Directory, suspicious logins, users that are not using their Active Directory as you would expect. And again, it allows you to improve your security by bringing this to your attention. You're also able to set policies that will restrict access. You won't block logins or require a multi-factor authentication or require a password change under certain risky conditions. So you click Create, and this will be enabled for your account. I've already got this enabled. So I'm going to close this up, and if I go into the services, I can type AD, and that will bring up the Identity Protection Service. Go into it, and we can see here now there's a whole new set of services that's going to tell us about the security of our Active Directory account. Now, right now, like I said, there's nothing really going on. I don't have any risk events. There's no high, medium, or low events that I need to investigate. There's no users that are flagged for suspicious activity, and there's been no vulnerabilities detected on my account. That's not strange for my account. If you ran this on a very large Active Directory, you might find different results. On the left, we see there's an Investigate section, and that's where you're going to investigate each of these three things: users, risk events, and vulnerabilities. And so if there were things to investigate, you would start here. The real fun happens in the configuration tab. So this is where you're going to set the policy that determines what is considered a risky user, what is considered a risky sign-in. So I'm going to click on sign-in risk. Now, this is a policy that I can create that says for this type of user, I want this, in this situation, I want this to happen. And it's going to estimate the impact. You know, if I had 1,000 sign-ins a day, but I set up a new policy, it's going to impact 500 of them, it's going to let me know. Okay, and then at the bottom, I can turn this policy off and on. Now, all users is pretty self-explanatory. If you go into it, you can actually select individual users or exclude individual users. Now, why would you want to exclude individual users from a security policy? Well, there might be certain categories of users within your organization that are naturally going to be doing riskier things, and you do not want them to be always having to call support, always having to change their password. So, for instance, you might have a development team that is going to use their accounts to use programs, or they're going to do a certain testing on this, and you may want to exclude your development team from the strongest policies, etc. I mean, it's a total corporate decision, basically, in terms of what policies, how strong to enforce the policies, and whether you do it evenly across the organization, or you exclude certain individuals, or you make it stronger based on your job role, etc. So we're going to leave that as all users, but we could certainly filter this policy down only to a subset. The conditions is where the machine learning kicks in, so we basically set a high, medium, or low risk level. So if somebody's detected, remember we talked about sign-in risk. One example of sign-in risk would be somebody is logging in from a geographic location in which they've never logged in before. So suddenly, I'm not trying to pick on a region of the world, but in a remote area of northern Russia, someone logs into your application, that could be considered a high risk sign-in, and you may want to set a policy that says, wait a second, if somebody's logging in from a area of the world that we're not expecting people to log in from, then we want to take additional precautions on that account. Okay, so we can say we want this to apply to almost everyone, low risk, medium risk, or only high risk sign-ins. I'm going to choose medium in this case. Now, what do we want to happen? So let's say for all users, if the machine learning algorithm detects it's a medium or high risk, what do we want to happen? So we go into controls, and we can either just blanketly allow access. We can allow access as long as they pass a multi-factor authentication, which would be a cell phone, an SMS message, an email, etc. Another way of verifying their identity before we allow them access to their account. Or we can just deny access, and then they'd have to call the help desk or something like that to get past it. Okay, so allowing access with multi-factor authentication seems like a reasonable precaution for a high risk or a medium risk sign-in. Again, from a device that you don't recognize, from a location you don't recognize, in a date and time that is not usually expected, etc. Now, that's my policy. Now we can review what this policy would impact against my account. Now again, this is a test account. Microsoft seems to be crying here. There's no data for them to analyze, but this happens, I guess. But presumably, if you had thousands of users and thousands of sign-ins, they would be able to say, oh, this would have impacted 0.1% of your sign-ins, and then you can turn the policy on and say save, and now you have a new policy that's putting against your Active Directory account that will restrict medium risk sign-ins to require authentication, multi-factor authentication, for instance. Now, they have the same, other than the sign-in policy, of course, there is the user themselves, right? So if they sign in or not, we can choose certain conditions. So again, we can choose which users it applies to. We can choose a risk level, low, medium, or high and above. And so what we want to happen, whether we want to block access or require a password change. So for instance, let's say a user has not logged in like 12 months. that could be the next time that they log in, that's an unusual event, and you may want to require a password change. So instead of requiring multi-factor authentication, this is just saying, you know what, it's been a long time since you've been here. Let's get you to reset your password. And again, you can review the users impacted, turn this on, and it becomes a user risk. And then this will get calculated on a daily basis into your report, and then you can start to investigate these things. You can set alerts, weekly digest email to you, and specifically, you probably want to pin this to your dashboard in order for this to be, basically something useful for you to review. Okay, so that's Azure AD Identity Protection. It's pretty easy to turn on and pretty easy to set up these types of policies. Microsoft has an article on their website talking about best practices. Certainly something we're looking to if you need to really set this up in a production setting. So next up, we're going to talk about something called self-service password reset. Go under the password reset setting on your Active Directory account. You could see this option to enable self-service password reset. This means that users of your Active Directory are free to change their passwords using Azure Active Directory, and you as an administrator don't need to be involved in order to reset their password. So this seems like a smart thing to enable. You do require a premium account in order to get access to this. Now you've got three options here. Is to turn it off, which is the default. You can turn it on for all users, or you can select a subset, which in this case would be a group. So you go into selected, select a group. I've enabled this for the accounting group, which is a group in my Active Directory, and click Save. So now there's going to basically be anyone who's a member of the accounting group is going to be allowed to change their Active Directory password without support intervention. The key settings here is under authentication methods to start. So first question is the number of methods required to reset. So when the next time the user is going to sign in, they're going to have to register for this self-service password reset, and that includes providing an email address and phone number, office phone, maybe questions they can fill out. So how many methods are required in order for them to successfully change their password? The default here is 1, and that seems to make sense. Depending on the amount of security you want to enable, you could then force them to both do email and SMS codes as a double method in order to reset. That's a bit excessive, but it's appropriate for some people, I guess. Now you have these 6 options for users to be able to authenticate. They can use a authenticator app, and that's a code that gets randomly generated on their phone that they have to enter. We see that in a lot of places. Sending the password reset by email, an SMS message to their phone, a call to their office phone, or answer a number of security questions. So by default, email and phone are the 2 options. I'm going to leave that unchanged. When we go to the registration section, this is going to say, do we require users to register? So the next time they sign in, they must provide a mobile phone. We should have their email address already, but these stuff is required in order for us to enable self-service sign-in. And how many days are they going to be re-prompted to verify their phone number and their email address? In this case, it's 180 days. So every 6 months, they're going to say, is this still correct? So we can see we've set up self-service password reset. Let's see if we can test it. So here I am being asked to log in to my account. I'm going to pick that John Doe user, which happened to be John at scottstestaccount@allmicrosoft.com. I have to enter password. So we can see here that Microsoft now prompting us to do this self-service password reset registration. So we have to provide a phone and an email, in order for us to move past this, and we've actually got I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. We got a timer that's got 15 minutes in order to provide the phone and the email. And so this is going to basically allow our users to be able to recover their password, reset their password without having to go through any kind of support, which is obviously a great benefit. So the next security setting we're going to investigate here within Active Directory is called conditional access. If we go into our Active Directory, which is a premium account, scroll down, we can see under security that conditional access is one of the options. We'll go into there. Now, by default, we get this baseline policy which says require multi-factor authentication for admins. I'm going to click into it. We can see that it's explaining it here. Basically, any administrator that is part of this group, which are global Active Directory administrators, or any of the specific applications like SharePoint Exchange or security administrators, they must have multi-factor authentication. And you can see that it's automatically enabled. In the future, use policy immediately, do not use policy. You can sort of set the settings. Also, you can exclude users, although if you're going to set a policy like this, having administrators that don't require multi-factor authentication seems like a security hole. So maybe this isn't the best policy to have exclusions, but you can basically set number of requirements for this. Okay, this comes with it, but we get this concept now, right? So in terms of a conditional access policy, you're basically selecting either all users or specific users, and we're basically selecting which condition we want them to require multi-factor authentication. Very similar to the identity protection feature. Again, this was specifically for administrators, but if we go into here and we say for selected users, and I'm going to select the accounting department again. Got to keep picking on them. For all, so this even includes the portal, right? So anyone who's in the accounting department, this policy, if they get locked out of their account, they're going to get locked out even out of the portal. So make sure there's somebody who can get in. This is only the accounting department, so let's call this accounting rules. That's fine. I want them to be included. So under what condition do we want accounting users to have to go through multi-factor authentication? So we've got these categories: sign-in risk, which devices they are using, where locations they're in, what apps they're accessing, and what the state of their device is. We'll take one of these one at a time. So again, very similar to the identity protection thing, there is a machine learning element that it basically categorizes someone as low risk, medium risk, or high risk when they do a sign-in. And so that's sort of the definition of that. And so if we want to say, well, if they are in a high risk situation, we want this policy to apply to them. Device platforms, if they are using a let's say they're using a phone device, so Android, iOS, and Windows Phone are the platforms that we want this policy to apply to. But if they're using a desktop, then the policy doesn't apply to them. Do we want any locations? So we can basically say any location that they're in is this policy will apply, or any trusted location or other locations. Okay, so let's not configure locations. Again, which apps they're going to be through browser or mobile apps, or any apps that you register to your account, and whether they are in a part of the hybrid network, etc. Okay, so we'll leave that turned off. So this is basically for high sign-in risks in fact, I'm going to change this to all platforms. So no matter what platform you're on, if you are high risk, this policy will apply to you. Now, what do we want to happen for all users in the accounting group who are part of a high risk situation. Again, we can either block access to them or we can grant access to them with multi-factor authentication, requiring them to be on a specific device like their office laptop versus personal laptop. They have to be part of the hybrid network, so logged into a Windows single sign-on. They have to be using an approved app in order to do the login, etc. So we can basically set the controls here. There's also session level controls, and so we can basically allow them to log into the application, but then give them very limited things that they can do within this single sign-on application. There, here we are. We can turn this policy on. So I'm going to go back to the access controls. I'm going to say grant access but require multi-factor authentication. Turn the policy on and hit create. And so now we have a requiring multi-factor authentication for all admins, and multi-factor authentication will be required if people are logged in what Azure identifies as a high-risk scenario, no matter what type of device they use, what Windows device or a Mac or a mobile device, they're going to have to go through multi-factor authentication as well. So that's using conditional access policies to restrict access to your applications and into the portal as well, based on machine learning rules, essentially. All right. So you see me a few times switching between Active Directory accounts. If I go to the top right here, there is a switch directory link, and I can see that I have a few Azure Active Directory accounts. I can set which directory is the default, so when I log in, this is what's going to be chosen first, and it's fairly easy to switch to between different accounts. We also saw earlier it's pretty easy to create new accounts, so if you do need multiple Active Directories, it's pretty straightforward to create a new one. Now in this video we're going to talk about access reviews. Now one of the challenging things when you get into working with large Active Directories is managing all the different accesses of all your users and all your groups, making sure that everyone has the access that they need and not more, and basically the day-to-day operations of managing the security of your organization. So Microsoft has been providing a number of tools, and we've gone through in this section security tools, privileged identity management, etc. But what we're talking about in this video is access reviews. So I have this account. It's still on the Azure AD premium level. And so we're going to go into this search box here and we're going to say access. And you can see access reviews is one of the services that's listed. So I can go into access reviews, and basically it's telling me that access reviews allow you to review and reduce employee and guest group permissions and access to the applications of your organization. You can do compliance and risk management, and basically if you have guest users, you can remove their access once their guest usage is over. Now you do need a premium P2 account to get access to this, or an enterprise mobility and security EMS license E5. So you have to go through an onboarding process to get started using these features. So we see most of it is grayed out. We do have to click the onboarding button. Now we have to create ourselves an onboarding access reviews. So clicking the create button will get us started with that. So that only took a few seconds. We have now onboarded access reviews. We're taken to a familiar overview screen here, and we can see that if we had applications associated with this account, we would have apps to review and groups to review. We haven't done any of the reviews yet, application access or group access. So right now we're seeing that our access is at 0 basically. So what is an access review? Basically, we're going to go either group by group or application by application and get a set of reviewers, one or more people, to review all the members of the group or all the people with access to the application, and to provide basically an approval or a denial for them to have continued access. Let's click off this review group members. We have to give the review a name. So let's call this test review 1. Now it has a start and an end date. If you're going to run this as a one-time review, then you could say it starts today and it ends a month from now. Okay. You do have the option of scheduling this. Maybe weekly is a bit excessive, but monthly, quarterly, or annually reviews of people who have access to this group or access to the application. Let's schedule this as a monthly review. How many days do the reviewers have to review access? Let's only give them 5 days. Okay, so because it's a monthly job, it's a reasonable amount of time for them to get their work done. And so we can say how many how many occurrences is it going to have. So let's say this is a monthly job. We want this to be a monthly review for the next 12 months. Okay, or it can never end. We're going to say we want to review the members of the group. We want to review everyone, not just guest members. And we're going to select the accounting group. There it is. Say select. The reviewers are, in this case, are going to be group owners. Okay. I guess you could get people to review their own access, but in this case, the group owners are the ones who are going to have to approve members of the group. And we're going to do this every month. We'll talk about programs, but right now it comes with a default program. What gets interesting is when you get down into the completion settings. So the person reviewing the access to this group is going to basically approve or deny access to those members of the group. And either we want to auto-apply those results. So at the end of the review, let's say after the 5 days, we say, you know what, if the person's been denied access, we're going to automatically remove their access. And what do you do should the reviewer not respond? So after the 5 days pass and the person who's responsible for reviewing access just didn't get in there to do any reviews, do you remove everyone's access? Do you approve everyone's access? So basically you've got a number of options here. So let's say we're going to be pretty brutal. If you don't respond, we're going to kick everyone out of the group. That's pretty extreme, but that's security, right? So the person who's supposed to be reviewing access doesn't do their job, then everyone suffers essentially. You do have some advanced settings, and we can see that it requires a reason. We're going to do notifications by mail. We're going to remind people that they have to get access done. So the reviewers have not completed the review. They're going to get regular reminders. Those are all enabled by default. And basically, we're going to kick off a review. So basically, an access review is this. It's a job within Microsoft Azure that basically requires group owners or application owners to review all of the members of that and all of the people who have access to those apps. And they basically have to, on a regular basis or a one-time basis, ensure that the people who are accessing it are supposed to. And that's part of a good security protocol.